Chapter 182. Jin Wang expressed that if he didn't want people to live, there really weren't many who could survive. The defeated Luo Daren was a bit dejected and didn't want to continue moving forward. Looking at Jin Wang's group, he was annoyed. In any case, they had been out for a long time, so they might as well return home. With Luo Peishan and a group of people who didn't want to do it, Li Hongyuan also couldn't get close to Jingwan. Thus, it didn't matter if they went back now. Moreover, if Luo Peishan wanted to go back, Wan would definitely listen to him and not listen to him. This was probably something that made a certain someone very dissatisfied. But there was no way to forcefully change these, it could only be done slowly step by step. One day a certain someone would make his heart say, "Listen to husband." In reality, there was no need to haggle over who would listen to whom. After returning, Li Hongyuan didn't return to the temporary residence but went directly to the Luo residence. Even if he was vaguely sent off, a certain someone was thick-skinned and completely pretended not to hear. But the other person was a Wang. Don't talk about driving him away. Even if it was a carriage, he could only sullenly walk behind. Jingwan refused to be in the same carriage as him and was still appeasing the very angry Luo Daren. Jingwan was also amused. Truly an old child. Even if grandfather was doing well in the officialdom, it couldn't change the fact that he was sometimes very childish. He wasn't narrow-minded and couldn't bear to see the younger generation stronger than himself. How could he be angered by Jin Wang like this? It was said that this happiness or anger was because he cared. Could it be that grandfather actually cared a lot about Jin Wang? Also, in any case, he was her future husband. As long as this kind of anger didn't really hurt his vitality and was full of vigor, perhaps he could be angry from time to time? Jingwan mischievously thought. Because Wang Ye had graced them with his presence, old Madame Luo naturally had to bring people to personally welcome him. However, Sun Yijia was still being raised and was a female of the same generation, so it was understandable that she didn't come out to welcome him. But Sun La Foreign had already left. Because Li Hongyuan didn't use the Wang Ye's honor guard, the whole process was just for show. He had already said that they were family, so there was no need to stand on ceremony. Since he didn't stand on ceremony, there was naturally no need to stand on ceremony with him. Everyone knew what Li Hongyuan was here for. However, they still left Luo Jingbua to entertain the guests. As for Lord Luo, he said that he was going to make tea and had no time to pay attention to him. Li Hongyuan didn't care about such a lack of manners at all. Luo Jingbua, who was left behind, felt very uncomfortable. This person's target was obviously his little sister and completely ignored him. He really wanted to slip away, but as an elder brother, he couldn't feel at ease leaving his little sister alone with a living hell. Thus, he could only brace himself and endure. However, the more he sat, the more awkward it became. Not to mention that Jin Wangye didn't even give him a single glance. From beginning to end, that gaze was on Jingwan's body, gentle and affectionate. It made him, who was already married, feel unbearable. Luo Jingbua even had a feeling that if Jin Wangye didn't admire his little sister, he would rather die. Although, as an elder brother, it was natural for anyone to admire their little sister. But when this person changed to Jin Wangye, it was still a bit unreal. Jingwan saw that her elder brother was clearly sitting on pins and needles, but still refused to leave. She was also helpless. Third brother, go and see sister-in-law. There were so many people here, Jin Wangye couldn't possibly do anything to her. Luo Jingbua was about to sternly refuse. Wangye was a guest, how could he neglect him? Third brother, go. Not to mention that you didn't neglect him, it was that he didn't pay attention to you at all. Then Wangye finally gave Luo Jingbua a look, still not leaving. Luo Jingbua silently got up and left. Seeing that Luo Jingbua seemed to have suffered a blow, Sun Yijia was quite surprised. What happened? Luo Jingbua showed a hopeless expression and shook his head. Sun Yijia raised an eyebrow. Jin Wangye already left? No. Sun Yijia's eyes turned. At Wan Mimi's place? Luo Jingbua glanced at her and didn't say anything. However, Sun Yijia understood his gaze. Don't ask, don't want to say. If he didn't want to say, then all the more she had to ask. She was bored right now. Her brows wrinkled, showing a worried expression. Could it be that something happened? Of course it's nothing. What could happen? But Jingbua, it's clearly written on your face that something happened. If you don't say, wouldn't it make me more worried? She was currently avoiding worrying, anxious, angry and other emotions that would harm her body. Don't think too much, I'll tell you. Sun Yijia immediately showed a bright and beautiful smile. How could Luo Jingbua not understand? She was sure that he would do whatever she wanted. He was completely at his wits' end now, but there was one more person. Actually, it's really nothing. Luo Jinghua just told her about his future brother-in-law's attitude towards his younger sister. And he only stated it from an objective point of view. There was no emotion at all. After Sun Yijiao finished listening, she was silent for a moment, then suddenly laughed. Isn't that a good thing? In the past, when Jin Wangye doted on someone, it would always cause an uproar. But now, even if he gets close to Wan Mimi, it's in private. Those who know are his own people, so he doesn't have to worry about ruining Wan Mimi's reputation. Wan Mimi is married and will be the Zhengfei. To be able to obtain Jin Wangye's affection, it's naturally far better than his indifference and even disgust. You're right. I just can't stand that feeling of being completely unnecessary. Sun Yijia looked at him teasingly. If you can't stand it, why didn't you leave earlier? You're still worried that Wan Mimi will be bullied? This is the Luo family's temporary residence, and there are so many people serving here. So you're asking for it? Luo Jingbo was speechless. Wasn't he asking for it? He clearly knew that he wasn't welcome, yet he insisted on being a hindrance. Didn't he see that his grandfather, the head of the family, had already slipped away? No matter what, he didn't have the qualifications to entertain the Wangye. Now that he thought about it, his grandfather wanted him to stay. It wasn't to let him entertain guests at all, but more to cause trouble for Jin Wangye. Grandfather Darren, you clearly know that it's a pit that you don't want to step into, but you shouldn't push your own grandson inside. In the end, Li Hongyuan wouldn't let Jingwan lose face in front of the servants. So, even if his heart was extremely eager, his words and actions always restrained themselves and abided by etiquette. Sometimes he still felt that the days were passing too slowly. Thus, after the meal in the Luo family, Li Hongyuan returned to his own residence. That's right, he didn't live in the temporary residence. Among the princes, only he had his own courtyard in the temporary residence and his own residence outside the temporary residence. These two places were naturally properly taken care of. Outside the gate of the residence, there was a carriage parked. Although there was no sign, but the subordinates still recognized it at a glance. It was the Huan family's carriage. Li Hongyuan heard this from inside the carriage, but his eyelids didn't even lift. There was no need for him to say it, the subordinates already knew what to do. After all, this was the Wangye's residence. It wasn't a place where any random cat or dog could stay. Just as they were about to drive them away, the person in the carriage had already come down and walked straight towards Li Hongyuan's carriage. Obviously, it was a woman wearing a veil, but she carried a baleful aura that made Li Hongyuan's bodyguard somewhat fearful. They looked at each other in dismay. This Ruan family's woman wasn't crazy, but instead she was like a malicious spirit preparing for revenge. Should it be said that she was worthy of being a woman who dared to fearlessly like the person that others avoided? However, when strength and courage matched, it was called arrogance. Having courage without matching strength was called foolishness. Logically speaking, when a minister with great power clashed with a powerless prince, the prince would usually be the one to retreat. However, this rule didn't apply to Li Hongyuan. When Ruan Fangfei was still one zhang away from the carriage, she was stopped by a bodyguard. "Miss, please leave quickly." Ruan Fangfei, however, had a cold look. She didn't care and forced her way forward. The bodyguard directly pulled out a knife and placed it on her neck. It was slightly painful. She didn't need to touch it to know that there was definitely blood. It was obvious that if she dared to take another step forward, she would die on the spot. She was very clear that in the current situation, even if she was really killed, she would only die in vain. Because as long as she was casually accused of a crime, her parents wouldn't be able to avenge her. Moreover, if she lost her life, what was the point of revenge? Today she just wanted to confirm one thing, not to throw away her life. She wanted to live and live well. However, her heart, which had long been eroded by evil spirits, no longer had the slightest concealment. "Li Hongyuan, how dare you?" The knife unrestrainedly went down a bit. However, she didn't have the same confidence as before when facing Li Hongyuan. She hated him so much that her teeth chattered. This subject only has one thing that she doesn't understand and wants to ask Prince. As long as Prince gives this subject an answer, this subject will immediately leave. After a long while, a voice finally came out from the carriage. There was only one word: scram. Ruan Fangfei clenched her fists. One must know that the injury on her palm hadn't healed yet, but she didn't seem to feel any pain. If this subject doesn't get an answer, I won't die in peace. Li Hongyuan finally showed mercy and came out of the carriage. He looked at her condescendingly without the slightest emotion, as if he was looking at an insignificant insect. "Whether you die or not, what does it have to do with this prince?" Although she had long realized that she had no place in his heart, when he said these words, her heart still hurt to the extreme, as well as the hatred that went deep into her heart. Although her love for Li Hongyuan might not be pure, it couldn't be denied that he was the only man who moved her heart. Since he was the only one, it was naturally engraved in her heart. Looking at that incomparably handsome face, that cold aura, just looking at it seemed to make one's heart beat faster. This man was dissolute and fond of beauty, but in fact he wasn't a warm person. Under normal circumstances he was very cold to people, even to the point of being taciturn. She originally thought that he would be like this for the rest of his life. Even if there was a change, it would be her who made him change. However, she saw that he was like an ordinary man who was gentle to the woman he admired, but that person wasn't her, not her. Ruan Fangfei suddenly laughed sinisterly. This subject's daughter won't die in peace. I'm afraid that I will become a malicious spirit, and then pester a slut named Luo Jingwan day and night. Ruan Fangfei swallowed back the words she was about to say. This was because Li Hongyuan had suddenly gotten off the carriage and rushed forward to grab her by the neck. He did not show any mercy at all. The only part of her face that was exposed to the outside instantly turned red. The color of blood slowly faded and turned a little purple. Her hand wanted to pry his hand away, but it was tightly clamped by his guard, unable to move. The shadow of death had never been so close to her. She suddenly regretted it. Against this man she had no chance of winning, so why did she come looking for him? Wasn't it a question that was like a fishbone in her throat? Could it be more important than her life? The sound of horse hooves was abnormally hurried. Your Highness, please be merciful. The old and young couple almost crawled out of the carriage. With Li Hongyuan's guard stopping them, they could only kneel on the ground and kowtow several meters away. Li Hongyuan used a little more strength. Do you think that if you die, you will have the chance to become a ghost? Even if you have that ability after dying once, this prince naturally has a way to make you die a second time, and die very thoroughly. Ruan Fangfei couldn't say anything for a while. She just stared fixedly at Li Hongyuan, her mouth opening and closing, letting out an inaudible low and hoarse voice. You have been using me to get rid of your fiancés? So what? If you didn't have this little bit of value based on your buzzing around this prince like a bedbug, would this prince let you live until now? Just for that woman from the Luo family? Li Hongyuan, how dare you, how dare you? Ruan Fangfei's eyes were red, and her voice was hoarse and unpleasant to the ears. Because she was shouting with all her strength, she felt a burning pain. Li Hongyuan paused for a moment, and his eyes were filled with hostility. You're not that stupid. Ruan Fangfei shivered. No matter how powerful a ghost was, it was still a ghost. How could it be compared to the king of hell? Stop joking. However, he admitted it. He admitted it was all for that woman. Who was he lying to? This matter started a few years ago. At that time they didn't have any interactions at all. That slut was not even 10 years old. If you don't like those women, just say it. If you don't want to marry them, just say it. In order to provoke me, you go along with my words. Why didn't you listen to me? Ruan Fangfei was still so self-righteous. Li Hongyuan moved closer. This prince is telling you, this prince won't take your life so easily. Everything is just the beginning. But you don't commit suicide because you can't bear it. He threw Ruan Fangfei away and stretched out his hand. Eunuch Mu, who had been waiting respectfully at the side, hurriedly handed him a brocade handkerchief. Li Hongyuan carefully wiped his hand and then threw it away. It happened to fall on Ruan Fangfei, who was lying on the ground. Lord Ruan, please take care of your daughter. She is already Uncle Zhong's woman. Not only is there a difference between men and women, but she can also be considered half of this prince's elder. It's fine if she lost her chastity, but if she also messed up her morals, she can find anyone to blame, but don't put it on this prince. Ruan Ruizhong knelt on the ground and shivered. He was angry and perhaps resentful. I've already said that she's a restless person. She's already made a scene in the capital, and it's the same today. She doesn't take good care of herself but runs out all day. Perhaps I should remind Uncle Prince Zhong to send someone to properly train her. Even if she's a side consort, she's still half a daughter-in-law of the imperial family. With her like this, even if your Ruan family doesn't find it shameful, the Li imperial family won't allow her to tarnish it. Chapter 183. Li Hongyuan flicked his sleeves and entered the door. The door closed with a bang. Then his carriage was also taken away. Madame Ruan quickly went forward and helped Ruan Fangfei up. However, someone was cruel and unscrupulous. She directly slapped her mother's hand away and struggled to get up. Perhaps some people felt that she had been deeply hurt. However, some people saw the coldness and ruthlessness in her eyes. There was also a strong hatred that could not be dissolved. Not only towards Li Hongyuan, but also towards her parents. She hated them for being unable to protect her, let alone avenge her. Ruan Rui, who stood up a step later, held his breath. His daughter had been humiliated like this. It was natural for her to hate. However, when she vented her anger on her own mother, how cold was it? When he thought of the suffering she had suffered, he felt extremely distressed. However, when he saw the people around him pointing and thought of the other children and grandchildren's complaints, it caused the whole family to be restless. One of his granddaughter's engagement was broken off and the other few who were discussing marriage disappeared. He washed his face with tears all day long. His daughter-in-law felt distressed for her daughter and was also sad all day long. Originally, he also wanted to take this opportunity to come out and relax and temporarily avoid it for a period of time. After all, there were only a few people who could come to the summer palace. Therefore, there were also many people who came out of the Ruan family. Who would have thought? Since the night before yesterday, the haze that shrouded the family, even he, the head of the family, began to be unable to suppress it. Before coming out, his eldest daughter-in-law led his daughter-in-law and even disregarded their status and requested to separate from the family. Just because of Ruan Fangfei as the daughter-in-law and granddaughter-in-law of the Ruan family, they were not even welcomed by their maternal family. The meaning was very clear. Don't bring the child back, lest she lead the maternal family astray. They made it clear to him in tears that they could either separate from the family or collectively hang themselves in front of the Ruan family's gate. In the past, the Ruan family was praised by everyone as a harmonious family. Now he was not dead yet, but they were beginning to fall apart. In the face of their threats, he was also angry. However, he could not vent his anger on them. When the atmosphere was stiff, a servant came to report that Ruan Fangfei had been out for more than 2 hours. Because she had not returned, they were really worried that something had happened to her. They had no choice but to brace themselves to report. At that time, what they said, she was not in good health, yet she still ran around everywhere. This was the reason why she had caused so much trouble. Outsiders said that she was not content with her family. What was wrong with that? At this time, she still went to find a man. Ruan Ruizhong naturally knew what the following words were. For the first time, he revealed such a frightening gaze. That daughter-in-law swallowed her words back. However, when she met his gaze, she was not afraid. She even revealed a mocking smile with resentment. If one paid a little attention, there was more than one who had this kind of gaze. For the first time, he realized that in this family, perhaps it was not as harmonious as he thought. The whole family, big and small, did not respect his stepwife as much as he thought. They loved his youngest daughter. The hatred in their eyes was not formed overnight. If they really held her in the palm of their hands after the incident, they would not be so cold as to put all the blame on her. Even if it was only jealousy of Fangfei's favor, it would not be just hatred at this time. Ruan Ruizhong was not stupid. The seeds of resentment had been buried long ago. It was only because of this incident that it burst out. Was it that the Ruan family's backyard was similar to other families? It was just that he did not know. But it was not the time to explore this question. Fangfei was not looking for anyone else. It was Jin Qinhuang. Why did she not give up until now? If her heart was not tied to Jin Qinhuang, how could she get to this point today? Although some things did not seem to be related to this, Ruan Ruizhong always felt that the source was here. Moreover, until now he did not know what happened the night before. Every time he mentioned it, his daughter would immediately cry like a pear blossom bathed in rain. His wife would also cry, saying that his daughter had been hurt so much that he should not let her remember those things. After 1 or 2 times he could only choose to give up. Moreover, because he felt that the matter was strange, it was not good to go to Zhong Qinhuang to reason. This kind of thing, if it continued, the one who would suffer losses would only be their family. Even when Ruan Ruizhong first entered the officialdom, he had never felt so tired. But in the end, she was the pearl of his palm that he held in the palm of his hand for more than 10 years. How could he bear to give up just like that? Let's go back first. Should he be glad that he was still the Grand Secretary of the Cabinet, still in a neutral position and did not have too many enemies? Otherwise, his situation would not be much better than the rest of the family. Fangfei, let's go home first. Old Madame Ruan persuaded. Ruan Fangfei still avoided her hand. Looking at her parents' gaze, it was like looking at an enemy. Why care about me? Wouldn't it be better to let me die? Ruan Ruizhong suddenly burned with anger and directly slapped. Since you want to die, then go die. When this person slapped and said those ruthless words, and then saw the other party covering his face with an expression of disbelief, he seemed to realize what he had done in hindsight. His hand trembled, his lips squirmed. The scene was silent for a few breaths. Suddenly he flicked his sleeves and left. Ruan Ruiz Hong was a qualified scholar official. He would dote on his wife and daughter. The premise was that the family was harmonious and the Ruan clan was prosperous. But now, to say that he did not blame his daughter who made the Ruan family like this? That was simply the biggest joke in the world. It was just that before, his tender love had taken the upper hand and he himself was not aware of it. Once it exploded, in addition to the disturbance in the family, Ruan Fangfei's mistake would be infinitely magnified. Her position in his heart would drop again and again. Old Madame Ruan probably did not expect it to be like this. But this slap made her heart tremble even more. What kind of man was this man? She was very clear. Ruan Ruiz Hong had always been good to her, but she neglected it. Now, it was like a basin of ice water was poured over her head. Even though it was June, it was still cold. Seeing Ruan Fangfei's gaze that seemed as if she couldn't wait to eat someone, she suddenly covered her eyes and whispered in her ear, "Fangfei, that's your father. Without him you are nothing. Without his protection, don't even talk about Jin Qinhuang humiliating you, any random cat or dog can trample on you. It's true that you are his beloved daughter, but compared to the entire Ruan family, you are nothing." Ruan Fangfei pulled away her mother's hand. In her eyes, the ruthlessness disappeared completely, leaving only tears and the grievance after being slapped. "Mother, good daughter, don't cry, don't cry. Your father is only, don't cry." Old Madame Ruan pulled her and chased after them. It was clear that they wanted to sit in the same carriage. After getting on the carriage, Ruan Fangfei directly knelt in front of Ruan Ruiz Hong. "Father, daughter is wrong. Don't be angry. Daughter is only. As she spoke, tears rolled down one by one. How could he be so cruel? "Father, this is the last time. Daughter will not miss him in the future. In the future, daughter will stay at home obediently and not go anywhere. Can you forgive daughter this time? It doesn't matter if you don't forgive. Just don't be angry and don't hurt your body. Father, father." Originally he already regretted that slap. Seeing her like this, his heart naturally softened. "Fangfei, father hates really hates Father, I'm sorry. It's all daughter's fault. It's all daughter's fault." Regardless of what happened here, after Li Hongyuan entered B courtyard, Mu Gonggong, who could not go out with him this time, quickly served tea. When Li Hongyuan drank the tea, "Master, the person has returned. Let me have a look." Mu Gonggong paused. "Master, how can you not look at such a filthy thing?" "Yes." The person who came back was naturally the person who stayed in the village to deal with the aftermath. And the thing he brought back was naturally the head of some people. It was not the head of an important person. Li Hongyuan wanted to see it purely because he was very bored. In order to be convenient to carry, each head was put in a medium-sized box. Mu Gonggong resisted the nausea. Although he was also the master's lackey, he was a close servant. He had never seen such a thing at such a close distance. After just a glance, he quickly looked away. However, he could not make too big of a movement. There was always a little shadow in the corner of his eyes. The more he wanted to ignore it, the more he could not. He almost had a feeling of collapse. Li Hongyuan's expression did not change. 6 people. It's a big investment. Although Li Hongyuan didn't place his men in the Ruan family's backyard, he still had a basic count of the number of guards who were trained to be secret guards. There were more than 30 of them. It wasn't a lot, but it wasn't a small number either. Any more and it would easily attract attention. Naturally, he didn't bring all of them with him on this trip. After all, many people weren't in the capital and it was easy to get things done. He only brought 16 of them, which was less than half of the total number. During the assassination he lost 3 and now he lost 6. That was to say there were only 7 left. Well, maybe he could count Madame Ruan in. Moreover, there might be some among the maidservants who were trained. If they didn't have these, there was nothing to be afraid of. Old rules. Li Hongyuan said indifferently after hearing about the general situation. Speaking of which, there were over 1,000 people in the village. If they were to kill them openly, no matter how powerful they were, they would only be chopped into pieces. The simplest and fastest way was to drug the water at the right time and then set a fire at night. The geographical location of that place was special enough. Even if half the sky was red at night, no one would know. However, it was a pity that before the medicine could be used, it had already been wiped out. Since they had already started, they would not give up easily. She would lose as many people as she took out, including those who stayed in the capital. Naturally, they would not be spared. Without these people, he wanted to see what that woman could do. Without that woman at the back, Ruan Fangfei would probably be like an ant struggling on the verge of death. After they left, "Master, the people in the west have also arrived. https://11/11807/6653186. Mobile edition. Chapter 184. With Li Hongyuan's order, the man was quickly brought over. The man who was tied behind his back was blindfolded. He had probably been washed before, so his clothes were clean and tidy. Although he did not take good care of himself, even without looking at his eyes, it was obvious that he was a little dispirited. However, it could still be seen that Zhang Xiang was handsome. Even though he was thin, there was a hint of strength in him. His leg was kicked and he knelt on the ground with a thud. The man did not resist. Instead, he felt a sense of relief as if he had finally met his target. He was caught for no reason, and then it could be said that he did not know whether it was day or night. It could be said that the horse did not stop all the way. At first, he roughly estimated the direction, the distance he traveled every day, and thought about who wanted to catch him and why. However, he was thrown on the back of a horse like a sack of goods. He was not young to begin with, so he could not bear such torment. Besides that, those people did not do anything to him, so he was too lazy to think so much. However, the target was still so far away, which was beyond his expectations. The black cloth in front of his eyes was removed. Because it was indoors, the light was not strong. Although he felt uncomfortable, it did not last for long. Then he finally saw the man sitting on the main seat a few steps away. Then he was stunned. Although he was sitting casually, he reflected his grace and nobility from head to toe. He seemed to be emotionless, but he had a dignified aura. Even if he was only dressed in linen, no one would think that he was an ordinary person. However, what really made the man stunned was not this, but that face. He thought that he had forgotten it, but when he saw that similar face, he realized that not only did he not forget it, but it was more like an indelible mark was carved by a knife day after day. Hua 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 hua. After being stunned, the man seemed to have broken down. He repeated this name repeatedly and tears fell like rain. The more he cried, the fiercer he became. He even looked like he was about to burst into tears. His body could not support it, so he bent down and pressed his forehead against the ground. Li Hongyuan narrowed his eyes slightly. It seemed that his previous guess was wrong. He knew that Momo was his birth mother's nickname. This nickname was usually used by people who were very close to each other, such as elders to juniors or between husband and wife. This man's reaction didn't seem like a blood relative. Although he had never heard anyone say it, Li Hongyuan knew that his appearance was more like his birth mother's. However, ever since he had grown up and gotten rid of his androgynous appearance, no one had ever said that he looked like a woman. His face was not feminine at all. It was a novel experience to hear someone shout a woman's name at him. However, it was a little annoying to hear a man howling like this. Li Hongyuan waved his hand and the man was carried out. Not long after, he was brought back. He had stopped crying, but from his chest up, everything was wet. It was obvious what had happened to him just now. He was forced to kneel on the ground again, but he couldn't help but stare at Li Hongyuan in a daze. Those who didn't know would think that this man was fond of Nan Feng and dared to have designs on Jin Qinhuang. Ha! Li Hongyuan chuckled. The man woke up as if he was struck by lightning. This person was obviously still the same person. Even his sitting posture hadn't changed, but the feeling that he gave people was different. The power that made people unable to breathe, the thing that was similar to his memory, was smashed to pieces. Terrifying, shocking, it made people tremble in fear. Li Hongyuan gently tapped on the armrest of the chair. It seems that you're awake. The man's heart was complicated. His lips moved as if he wanted to say something, but not a word came out. You should know who Ben Wang is. If he really cared about his birth mother, there was no reason not to know her son. 6th Imperial Son, Qin Wang, title Jin. The man slowly spat out 9 words. Li Hongyuan nodded. Then tell me who you are. Wang Ye did not hesitate to invite this commoner from thousands of miles away, but you don't know who this commoner is? The man suppressed all the emotions in his eyes and became calm, with a "who are you trying to deceive" look. Li Hongyuan's mood at this time could be considered good and didn't do anything. Not only that, he appeared particularly honest. I really don't know. I thought it was someone from the Pei family. With Li Hongyuan's change of face, the man really couldn't figure out his true temperament in a short time. However, he didn't know what he was thinking. This commoner's surname is Min, given name Yuhan, the present Imperial Gui Fei's ex-fiancé. Full of malice. As if they heard something incredible, some of the people listening had numb expressions. Unfortunately, Li Hongyuan didn't have any reaction. A little disappointment flashed through the man's eyes. When the present Qin Wang was a Qin Wang, he went to Jiangnan on a mission and fell in love with the daughter of the Pei family. The relationship between the Li royal family and the Pei family has never improved. In addition, the legitimate daughter of the Li royal family is not a concubine, but this woman insisted on having her own way. She would rather exterminate the family to choose her lover. Nonsense. The man's liver and guts were torn apart, and his eyes were red. He's just a lecher who uses his power to bully others and kidnaps women. Wan and I were childhood sweethearts, and we were just a few days away from getting married, just a few days. That despicable and shameless villain used the Pei family and the Min family to blackmail her. Wan was kind and couldn't bear to see the two families suffer, so she gave herself up and gave herself to that villain. She was clearly the legitimate daughter of a noble family and couldn't be more honorable, but she had the reputation of being exterminated from the family. Then, without a name or surname, she entered the capital alone and entered that cannibalistic place. Don't listen to Min Yuhan's mournful words. In fact, Li Hongyuan didn't feel anything. Not to mention that when he was born, his mother was already dead, so he didn't have any feelings. Even if his old man kidnapped someone, he didn't feel that it was wrong. If it was him or Wan, it would be best if they could achieve their goal peacefully. If they couldn't, not to mention the two families, he would destroy the whole world. From this point of view, he was definitely Lu Qingdi's seed, and the student was even better than the master. However, he wouldn't change the identity of Wan like his old man. No matter how high Wan's birth was, he would let people know clearly who he was holding in the palm of his hand. Of course, he was completely different from his old man. Wan was also the same with his mother. There was no comparison. It is indeed a cannibalistic place, but didn't she die in a few years? Hearing him speak so coldly as if he was talking about an unrelated person, the anger and hatred seemed to materialize. You caused her death, but you don't feel guilty at all. You are indeed the one with the surname Li. You are rotten to the core. Li Hongyuan didn't take it seriously. So you also believe that she died of blood loss due to dystocia? Min Yuhan was stunned. What do you mean? What I mean is that she was strangled to death by her husband. After she died, this prince was cut out from her stomach by her husband. Don't talk about her glory when she was alive. After she died, there was a big cut on her body. Isn't it very pitiful? Li Hongyuan said with a casual smile and malice towards Min Yuhan. Min Yuhan widened her eyes in disbelief, but she didn't doubt Li Hongyuan's words. Her heart was about to explode. Why? Since he tried so hard to get her, why didn't he cherish her? Why didn't he dote on her and protect her? Why did he kill her with his own hands? Why? He originally thought that at least she was living a good life. Then, even if he was in heart-wrenching pain, he would at least have a little peace of mind. She didn't have a noble status, but she was already an imperial noble consort. After she passed away, her son was greatly favored. He thought that these were all evidence of her good, but it turned out that, why? It's probably because of you. Min Yuhan felt as if he had been struck by lightning. Lu Qingdi snatched her, so he naturally knew of your existence. And according to what you said, you were in love with each other. Do you think that Lu Qingdi didn't have any grudges in his heart? The harem is a place where there are a lot of disturbances. Once you are caught, you will most likely lose your life. In her previous life, she heard from imperial consort Su that it seemed that something that shouldn't have appeared by his mother's side had caused his father to be especially suspicious. Logically speaking, if he suspected another man, his father wouldn't have lost his mind and killed him. After she was pregnant, did you go to the capital and try to contact her? Min Yuhan's face stiffened and the corners of her mouth twitched. Tsk, she actually guessed correctly. With his father's character, he dared to do such a thing. Was he courting death or was he courting death? I didn't want to see her and she didn't want to see me. I only asked someone to pass her something and she sent me a letter. She told me that she was very good and asked me to find a good girl to start a family with. Then she asked me to leave the capital and never go back. Min Yuhan seemed to have lost her soul as she muttered, "In the end, was I the one who harmed her? Was I the one who harmed her?" Harem was easy to say, but it was also difficult to say the least. It depended on the person and the situation. His mother's situation was absolutely impossible. It seemed that his father had never suspected his mother of being unfaithful. It was just that he had treated her with all his heart for a few years. In the end, she still had another man in her heart. 9 out of 10 men would probably explode. It was very common for someone to fan the flames and do something irrational in a moment of impulse. Chapter 185. Li Hongyuan saw that his soul seemed to have left his body, and his vitality seemed to be leaving his body little by little. Even if he were to say that he would die here, it probably wouldn't be a strange thing. However, these were not within the scope of Li Hongyuan's consideration. About the western border of Qiyuan, what do you have to say? This sentence pulled Min Yuhan back from his out-of-body state. The way he looked at Li Hongyuan changed. This commoner doesn't understand what Wang Ye is talking about. Until this question, he didn't understand the intention of this Jin Qin Wang to invite him. Even if it was to pull out some unknown competition, it would only be an accident and not the original purpose. But now he vaguely understood. However, because he vaguely understood, he couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. It doesn't matter if you don't understand. Since you have already said your origin, there will always be people who understand. At the very least, there is Jiangnan's #1 family, Pei clan. There are tens of thousands of people in the clan. Adding in the marriage and other messy relationships such as teachers and students, the number of people is at least 100,000. With so many people, there will always be a few who understand. At worst, Ben Wang will just spend some time and ask them one by one. Tell me, should Ben Wang start from the core of Min clan and Pei clan, or should I start from the periphery? Min Yuhan's eyes were about to split open. He suddenly got up and rushed towards Li Hongyuan. Not to mention the fact that this middle-aged man with his hands tied and his body didn't look very good. What kind of threat could he pose to Li Hongyuan? And the others who stayed at the side were especially vegetarians. If they let such a person get close to master, they don't need to mingle. However, with just one step, he was subdued in an instant. His entire upper body was pressed to the ground and his head was ruthlessly stepped on. Min Yuhan's insignificant struggle didn't have the slightest effect. Beast, that's your maternal family, ah. How can you be so ruthless? You really are his seed. He also hated himself for being too careless. Because the other party was Bien's son, he was surprised that the other party knew his identity. In addition, he deliberately wanted to disgust the other party, so he easily revealed his identity. However, even if she didn't say anything, would he really not know? Li Hongyuan waved his hand and Yi pulled him up, but his hand was still on Yi's shoulder. Were you going to call me a beast? It probably didn't feel good to swallow it back, but as long as he still had his reason, it was still bearable. Although there are many people who curse this prince behind my back, those who curse in front of this prince are probably dead. This prince is still a prince, and the face and dignity of the imperial family are still important. Li Hongyuan took a sip of tea. As for the maternal family you mentioned, from the perspective of the adoptive mother, the maternal family should be surnamed Su. However, this prince has never been interested in the Su family. From the perspective of the biological mother, she was an orphan, so where did this maternal family come from? For more than 20 years, this prince hasn't even seen the shadow of the Pei family. Now that you've stirred up trouble and implicated the Pei family, you have the nerve to claim kinship with this prince. How many people have called this prince shameless? Obviously, this prince thinks that he is far less shameless than you people. Li Hongyuan was still undisciplined, but Min Yuhan's face was like a color palette, exceptionally wonderful. It wasn't clear whether she was more embarrassed or angry. The Pei family, not to mention Jiangnan, even in the entire Qiyuan, is considered the most powerful family. Even if no one enters the imperial court as an official, they have the imperial edict of Taizu. Unless the Pei family commits a great crime of rebellion, the Li imperial family can't make things difficult for the Pei family. The Min family can't compare, but they are also entangled. How can it be so easy to remove them? Back then, imperial father used your two families as a threat, but that was a joke. You were really tough to the end. At that time he was only a prince, so what? Can he really uproot both of your clans? If he did it properly, he could even push all the aristocratic families to the opposite side of him. At that time, not to mention dealing with your two families, it is possible to demote him to a commoner, or even remove him from the family. She said that she didn't want the two families to suffer and was willing to give herself to you. If you didn't allow it, could she have run away on her own? In the end, she was just a person who could be casually abandoned. It was fine to announce her sudden death to the public, but in order to show your so-called loyalty, you resolutely refused to have anything to do with the Li imperial family. You removed a dead person from the family and cut off her connection with the Pei family. It's enough that you pretended to be benevolent to this extent. You were afraid that outsiders wouldn't know that there was something fishy going on. What do you know? You can't do it openly, but you can't do it secretly? Who doesn't know how to put up a front? Even if he was only a prince at that time, he had an emperor as his father. You people in the imperial family are better at venting your anger, aren't you? The Pei family has the so-called protective talisman, my Min family doesn't. Since that's the case, you also agree with what she did in your heart. In your heart, the Min family is more important than her. Who are you trying to show by pretending to be deeply in love with her? Li Hongyuan suddenly became angry and the teacup in his hand was thrown out. If you didn't run to the capital for no reason, would she have died? If she didn't die, would this prince be born as a devil and be deprived of the right to inherit the throne at birth, to the extent that I can only plot in secret? Would it take a lot of effort to marry a woman I like? Li Hongyuan's biological mother didn't die. In his previous life he would have walked a completely different path. As the saying goes, a son's status depends on his mother. The most basic thing was that his mother was loved by Emperor Lu Qingdi, and there would be a lot of people willing to be loyal to him when he was born. Even Emperor Lu Qingdi would pave the way for his throne. In his life he probably had nothing to do with Jingwan at all, so he was definitely venting his anger on her. It was really true that the members of the imperial family could vent their anger easily and confidently. However, Min Yuhan seemed to be strangled by someone. Even if he wanted to quibble and deny, he couldn't say a word. His face was ashen. Back then, when Tao Wu left, he was put under house arrest by his family. This house arrest lasted for 3 years. However, other than the initial agony, even though he was still in low spirits, he accepted this fact. It seemed like he was powerless to accept this fact, but in reality, just as Li Hongyuan said, it was only because he had lost the love of his life. From the beginning he did not feel that his family should risk their lives to keep Tao Wu. For so many years he had never realized this problem, but now it was exposed. Was he like this? So everything was his fault? Li Hongyuan, who was in a state of rage, didn't directly go forward to kill Min Yuhan. He was considered lucky. However, probably because his current state was too frightening, Min Yuhan didn't fall into a trance for long. Thinking about it, with such a murderous person around, how many people could be completely immersed in their own thoughts without being disturbed? Because he was sober, Min Yuhan finally realized another important point from Li Hongyuan's words. The devil. A prince, born as a devil, lost the most important right of a prince the moment he was born. If there was hatred, he should be the one who should be hated the most. Fortunately, Lu Qingdi didn't go too far and gave him the honor that a prince should have. Otherwise, what kind of life would he be living? Whether he could live until now was a big problem. He was Fu Cheng's child. When he thought of him living such a life, he suddenly felt extremely distressed. Because he knew that it wasn't Li Hongyuan who killed his mother, and the other half of his bloodline came from the enemy who killed his mother, the hatred that he originally had for Li Hongyuan collapsed. At this moment, Min Yuhan was unprecedentedly sober. He had been muddle-headed for so many years, and at this moment he seemed to have finally found his goal. Fu Qing, I will do my best to help your son get everything he wants. Then I will look for you. Because his mentality had changed, the way he looked at Li Hongyuan had also changed. He was not even affected by Li Hongyuan's terrifying aura. Instead, he looked at Li Hongyuan with the affection of an elder towards a junior. He even fantasized that if Momo married him, Li Hongyuan would be his son. Therefore, after Li Hongyuan calmed down, he clearly saw that the way Min Yuhan looked at him was getting weirder and weirder. From the initial affection he didn't know what his imagination was, but later on, there was even a bit of pity. Even Li Hongyuan couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Then he sneered. One must know that he had never seen such a look from imperial concubine Su. Who was Li Hongyuan? Did he need others to pity him? To be honest, Li Hongyuan didn't think that he could understand the thoughts of people like Min Yuhan. Originally, he didn't intend to let him live after letting him know something that he shouldn't know. But now, perhaps he could reconsider. Take him away and let him wake up. Just looking at him now was annoying. The ground was quickly cleaned up. Eunuch Mu personally took the initiative. What devil? He didn't hear it at all. Li Hongyuan sat in the same place and seemed to be lost in thought as he looked at a certain place. Min Yuhan was quickly brought back. This time his hair was wiped and combed again. Not to mention other things, his spirit had returned. The feeling that he gave off was completely different. He even seemed a few years younger. Although the Min family couldn't be compared to the Pei family, it was still a noble family. Min Yuhan was also a direct descendant. Naturally, the education he received was top-notch. He took back the style of an aristocratic family's descendant. Greetings, Your Highness. Although his gaze towards Li Hongyuan was still gentle, it was no longer as gentle as before. Li Hongyuan just looked at him indifferently. However, Min Yuhan automatically told him about the incident at the western border. In fact, there were only some signs of the incident. He happened to encounter it and secretly added fuel to the fire. As for the purpose, naturally, it was to cause trouble for the Li family. It would be good if he could cause internal strife or even overthrow the Qi Yuan. Anyone who was the emperor would be better than the current emperor. Li Hongyuan roughly knew about this matter and didn't need Min Yuhan to elaborate. Thus, he waved his hand and interrupted him. Is the remnant of the previous dynasty related to the Pei family? Chapter 186. Previously he was ready to fight Li Hongyuan for the sake of the two clans. Now he turned around and betrayed the two clans. It should be known that regardless of whether it was harboring or assisting, as long as it was related to the remnants of the previous dynasty, regardless of the number of remnants, even if there was only a little child left in the direct bloodline, it was already a crime of treason. It was enough to implicate 9 generations of the clan. In this way, how should one describe Min Yuhan? Should one say that he was heartless to the point that he didn't recognize his own family and was inhumane? Or should one say that he had deep feelings for his past love and that he placed righteousness before family after a sudden awakening? He once chose loyalty and filial piety, and now he chose friendship. It seemed good, but in fact it was both wrong. Min Yuhan, you feel sorry for her, and now you want to compensate this prince? Min Yuhan's silence was equivalent to tacit agreement. Li Hongyuan sneered, you and that despicable and shameless villain who stole your fiancée are essentially the same. He killed her and then regretted it. He thought that he was infatuated with her for more than 20 years, and he didn't even ask if the dead person wanted it. Then he tried his best to make it up to this prince. As long as this prince didn't covet the throne, it was as if he had forgotten that this prince's birth represented inauspiciousness. Even if he poked a hole in the sky, he would still take care of it. You couldn't protect her, so you also played the role of infatuation without regret. Similarly, have you asked if she wanted it? However, she's a dead person. If you want to ask, then you have to follow her down. Unfortunately, you are all greedy for the mortal world and are not infatuated enough to accompany her. You only live according to your wishes. Now that you know that her death has a lot to do with you, you are ready to blame it on this prince. She is a dead person, but this prince is still alive. Have you asked if this prince needed it? When this prince had no power, no status, and even his life was guaranteed, his compensation could only give this prince these things, so I accepted it. What about you? Do you think this prince needs you? After knowing what you've done, will you still be allowed to live freely? Min Yuhan, what gave you such an understanding? As she spoke, the mockery in her eyes was simply too obvious. At the beginning, Min Yuhan wanted to refute. How could he be the same as that person? However, when he finished listening, he was speechless. Even though his heart was burning with pain, he felt more and more that he was the same as that person. He was full of confidence and wanted to help, but he thought too highly of himself. Since this child knew his whereabouts and his plan was destroyed just as it started, it was obvious that the power in his hands was not weak. From this short contact, he understood that he was definitely not a kind person. Now that he knew the source, it was only a matter of time before he wanted to investigate the matter of the remnants of the previous dynasty. He looked like a big joke. Min Yuhan, who had just regained her energy, was dispirited again. After a moment of silence, she said, "That's good too. I can go see your mother sooner." "You don't care about Pei clan and Min clan anymore?" "I don't care. I can't care. It's not up to me to care. All these years I have only used the surname of Min. They expected better from me and scolded me for indulging in love all day. I really don't have the heart to do anything." What Min Yuhan didn't say was that perhaps the Min and Pei families had a close relationship through marriage for generations. There were many officials in the Min family, but there were very few who reached the 3rd rank and above. Obviously, it was because of the relationship with Pei family that they were suppressed. As for Pei family, as the richest family, it looked like they had a huge network of connections. However, when it came to interests, because they didn't have power, Pei family couldn't have the absolute right to speak. This was a great humiliation for the richest family. Thinking back to the unlimited glory of the previous dynasty, compared to the current situation, they had long had enough. Due to the ancestral teachings, they couldn't enter the officialdom. Therefore, the best way was to change the surname of the emperor. It could be something else, but it could also be Pei. How could the Min family not have such restlessness? Although Min Yuhan hated Luqingdi to the core and wanted to directly overthrow the Li family, after nearly 100 years the Qi Yuan had already stabilized. Even if it had a great influence in Jiangnan, the people lived and worked in peace and contentment. They had long recognized that the Li family was the orthodox family. Even if they used the descendant of the previous dynasty as a banner, it was estimated that not many people would follow. Moreover, whether it was the Pei family or the Min family, they basically didn't have any military generals. As the saying goes, if a scholar rebels, it won't succeed in 3 years. The right time, the right place, and the right people were all not on the same page. But in reality, there were many people in the two families who had such ambitions. If this continued, they would be finished sooner or later. Rather than ending up with the execution of the whole family, it was better for Prince Jean to cut off those people's thoughts now so that they wouldn't end up with the extermination of the family. Prince Jean was destined not to expose this matter. For a prince who had hidden all his forces in the dark, exposing this matter meant that everything was exposed. Moreover, he could feel that Prince Jean didn't care about the descendant of the previous dynasty. It wasn't even contempt, it was as if he didn't put them in his eyes. Towards such an existence, who would muster such a large force? Didn't Li Hongyuan know about this situation? Of course he knew. In the previous life he was the one who tidied up the Pei family. Naturally there wasn't anything that he didn't know. However, that unrealistic ambition was quite laughable in Li Hongyuan's eyes. Fortunately, the Pei family didn't brazenly pull out the remnants of the previous dynasty. Otherwise, it wouldn't be as simple as cutting off the Pei family's wings. It was a trivial connection and rebellion. If it wasn't exposed, it could still be hidden, but if it was exposed, it would only lead to death. Li Hongyuan nodded, seemingly agreeing with his words. He slightly hooked the corner of his lips. Go see her? You say you want to see her and she wants to see her? What do you take her for? Moreover, in 22 years she might have already reincarnated. She might even be the mother of several children. Li Hongyuan continued to stab without holding back. This stab was so ruthless that his body swayed and he almost fell to the ground. Even though he staggered and stood firm, the rising and falling of his chest became more obvious. The frequency of the rising and falling of his chest also increased. In addition, he tightened the clothes on the left side of his chest. Blue veins protruded from the back of his hand. All of these indicated that he was in a terrible state. Even so, Li Hongyuan still hooked the corner of his lips. There was no warmth in his eyes. He was calm and unruffled. The bystanders couldn't help but feel pity for Min Yuhan. Falling into the hands of the master, she could only admit that she was unlucky and had to face physical and mental hardships. As for whether she would be unable to bear it and die, if she really died she should feel lucky. Perhaps it was because he had long been accustomed to this kind of scene. No matter what he thought in his heart, his face didn't show a trace of it. Not only that, he could also ensure that he could listen to the master's orders at any time and wouldn't make a mistake because of being distracted. With such a poor ability to bear it, Li Hongyuan lost interest. His initial purpose of catching Min Yuhan was to determine whether he was a member of the Pei family. His goal was achieved and he even gained additional benefits. That was it. Send him away. Annoying. Yes. Because they weren't inside the imperial residence, there weren't many guards guarding the place. It wasn't difficult to get people in and it wasn't difficult to send them away. They didn't even need to wait until nighttime. The carriage with the symbol of Jin Qin Wang Fu swaggered around and no one would question it. During this period, Min Yuhan's chaotic and blank mind cleared up a little. Li Hongyuan still kept his life and sent him away. Then he probably knew Li Hongyuan's intention. When they reached a place far enough away, Yi gave Min Yuhan some banknotes and some broken silver, enough for him to return to Jiangnan. Does Wang Ye have any specific instructions? Although Yi came out with him, he still couldn't help but ask. After all, the other party was his subordinate. Even if there were no clear instructions, he should be able to guess some of the master's thoughts. This was an essential skill for every subordinate. Master's thoughts have always been unpredictable. The specific matters will have to be handled by Mr. himself. What was the most annoying? It was this kind of thing without a goal. He couldn't estimate to what extent he had to do it, just like that. Whatever. I understand. Min Yuhan accepted this statement indifferently. For him, it was better if there were no instructions. Then he could do everything that he thought was beneficial to Jin Wangfu. Because when he was completely not recognized and not accepted, naturally there wouldn't be that kind of arbitrary situation where I'm doing it for your own good without considering other factors. That was something that really overflowed with Li Hongyuan. Yi nodded and left without saying anything. Min Yuhan looked at the carriage that was getting farther and farther away. He let him know the good things that he shouldn't know, but he let him go so easily. If he wasn't stupid, then he had absolute confidence. Min Yuhan recalled the short time that he got along with the other party. He was definitely not a stupid person. Perhaps he hadn't reached the point where he could control the whole situation, but he had reached the point where he wasn't afraid of being exposed. To be able to make him cheer up and dejected several times, it wasn't difficult to control a person's life and death. What was difficult was to control a person's emotions. Mimi, your son is completely different from you. However, he is very outstanding and very strong. Wait for me. I don't care if you've reincarnated, married, or given birth to a child, I'll still find you. Let me be selfish just this once. I can't let go of you. But for this matter, whether you agree or not, I'll persist. In the future, before I do anything else, I'll ask for your opinion. Maybe at that time he will become our son. Min Yuhan revealed a shallow smile. He was walking towards an unknown road. Perhaps it would be full of thorns, and perhaps in the end he would be deserted. But it didn't matter. He didn't care anymore. Li Hongyuan dealt with the information gathered from other places and seemed a little bored. Immediately send the things to the Ruan family. Yes. Shouldn't sending heads be done at night? It was broad daylight. Did master not find it troublesome? However, shadow guards never had a sense of self. Their master's words were their first will. The Ruan family was now in a chaotic period. Lord Ruan, who had always been successful in the court, was helpless in the face of his daughters-in-law's coercion. It was said that a woman should treat her husband as her god. However, at this time his son was useless. Master, someone outside the door has sent something. Lord Ruan, who was in a terrible fix, needed something to divert his attention. He felt that this was the right time. What is it? Bring it in. When a wooden box was carried in, Madame Ruan, whose eyes were red and swollen from crying, was inexplicably flustered. Chapter 187. Because the situation was in a stalemate, Ruan Ruizhong was not the only one who needed other things to ease the tension. They needed it even more. It was unfilial of them to force their father-in-law. They were just relying on the fact that the Ruan family was a family of etiquette and their father-in-law was the Grand Secretary of the Cabinet. They wanted to save face and would not do too much. If the daughters-in-law of the Ruan family collectively had an accident, the reputation of the Ruan family, which was at the heart of the storm, would be completely ruined. Ruan Ruizhong might even have to retire early. However, their actions had already offended all the men of the Ruan family. The Ruan family's reputation was now so bad that the impact was too great. Even the grandmothers of the Ruan family who had married out used to visit their parents' home every now and then, but now it seemed that they had not seen them for a long time. Although Ruan Ruizhong was still the Grand Secretary, he was already showing signs of decline. There was also the Minister of Personnel Affairs who was like fire and water with him. The help he could give in the imperial court was rapidly decreasing. Everyone was sensible. Who would want to help a person who was tainted with dirty water and was becoming more and more unreliable? For the sake of the children, they wanted to split the family and reduce this impact. What was wrong with that? However, neither their husband nor their son supported them. Their mother and sister were such good people. It was fine if outsiders slandered them, but their own family members were hindering them at this time. It was simply unreasonable. Words of reprimand and heart-wrenching made them feel so much pain that they wished they were dead. Look, this was the ability of that woman. Because she could give these old and young masters what they wanted the most, whether it was money, connections, or even official positions. Regardless of whether they were legitimate or illegitimate, if they were rejected by their father-in-law, as long as they came to her, they would basically be satisfied. The most terrifying thing was that in order to keep them in suspense and control their greed, other than money, the benefits they received were basically small favors. However, she could make them not complain at all and even be deeply grateful. Moreover, the mother-in-law and husband were acting intimately. They did not dare to say anything when they bumped into it, but were provoked by the mother-in-law. This was the truth of the harmony of the Ruan family. The daughters-in-law of the grandchildren were better off. They were simply a pool of bitter water in their hearts. They knew what was going on, but they could not find anything that could be used against her. There was probably no sisters-in-law who could be more harmonious than them, because their enemies were the same, but the other side was like a mountain, unshakable. They wanted to use this opportunity to change the predicament of being completely in the palm of someone else's hand. However, without the support of a man, they huddled together tightly. As time passed, they seemed isolated and helpless, especially when they met the woman's sinister gaze. She wouldn't do anything to them now, but after that, their hearts couldn't help but tremble. Even if they threatened to kill themselves, they knew that the chances of success were not high. However, they had no other choice, really no other way. Even if she had staked everything on this one throw, she could not hold on anymore. If her father-in-law's benevolence was gone, they would be completely finished. Therefore, when the things were carried in, they stood aside. Ruan Ruizhong ordered someone to open it. "Master, don't be in a hurry," Madame Ruan spoke out to stop him. "First ask who sent it and what it is. Now is an eventful time." With a bit of melancholy and lamentation, Juan Ruiz Hong was startled and understood her meaning. His face became serious. If they received something that they should not have received at this time, it could be fatal. Moreover, to send things to the Ruan family now, they either wanted to take advantage of the situation or had bad intentions. Who sent it? Where is the name card? Master, the other party did not leave a name card. Bastard, daring to accept things without a name card. Where is the person who sent it? Has he also left? Master, I also asked someone to stop them but they could not. Moreover, the other party also said that it was best to quickly carry it in and hand it to Madame Ruan. It would not be good if outsiders saw it. I really can't do anything. Juan Ruizhong's gaze froze. This clearly told them that this thing was not a good thing. He looked back at his wife with a puzzled expression. The other party also had a puzzled expression. In fact, he did not know. Knowing that it was for her, Madame Ruan's heart became more and more uneasy. Master, why don't we carry it out first? There were too many people present. If it was really something bad, it would not be easy to deal with it. Juan Ruiz Hong nodded. Carry it to the backyard. The two people from before were about to go forward and tie the rope again. Suddenly, a person rushed out from the side and pushed the box back. After the originally unlocked wooden box was overturned, the lid naturally opened and 2 or 3 things rolled out. There was a moment of silence. Ah! Terrified screams rose one after another. The people nearby immediately fled in all directions. Juan Ruiz Hong also took 3 steps back, his face pale. However, he could not sit still anymore. If this continued, before he fell, the family would be disbanded. If Madame still has energy, send people to check if the family is missing. If not, go back and rest. I won't force you. Master, where are you going? Madame Ruan held him tightly as if it could give her a sense of security. Juan Ruiz Hong patted her hand. I am going to meet the Emperor. The other party is so rampant. Since I have seen them, I must find the mastermind behind them. Otherwise, our family will not have a peaceful day. Madame Ruan's lips moved. She was very clear that the other party dared to brazenly send things to their door and did not keep them on the spot. Afterwards, there was no hope of catching them. In the end, she did not say anything to dissuade them because there was no reason to stop them. What she was most worried about now was how much the other party knew about her. If it was only on the surface, then it was fine. If everyone retreated. There was only a wooden box with 6 heads left in the hall. This kind of thing appeared again and again. Many of the masters and servants in the Ruan family were abnormally terrified. First, it appeared in the daughter's carriage. Now it named the mother. It was as if the mother and daughter were the source of all this. When they saw Madame Ruan, they could not help but step back. It was as if there was something dirty on her body that would contaminate them. The next one who would be sent the heads would be them. Madame Ruan's face was full of anger. She had never seen her like this. Her stepson, who originally wanted to comfort her, subconsciously stepped back. She knew that she was in a mess and somewhat out of control. She hurriedly restrained her emotions. Her face was pale and weak. She looked very haggard. She glanced at them and paused for a moment on the daughter-in-law who had pushed the box. Go back and rest. Restrain the children. The servants, beat them if necessary. Don't let them scare the children with their big mouths. It did not matter whether what they saw was an illusion or not. At this time no one stayed. Whether some couples would quarrel or even fight after returning, no one cared. Madame Ruan ordered people to investigate. She knew in her heart, but she still had to put on an act. After sending everyone away, Madame Ruan stood outside the door and looked at the wooden box in the room. Her gaze was deep. Just as she was about to turn and leave, she saw her daughter walking over like a ghost. Fangfei, why are you not resting? What are you doing here? Ruan Fangfei stood beside her and looked into the room. Heads. Same as last time? What heads? Who are you listening to? Fangfei, come back with mother. Mother is a bit tired and wants to rest. Ruan Fangfei avoided her hand and stepped over the threshold. She walked in and reached out to open the box. Fangfei? Her mother hurriedly pulled her. Be good. Go back with mother. Ruan Fangfei stared at her mother. Her eyes were like stagnant water. Then Madame Ruan let go. Ruan Fangfei opened the box and saw the familiar ferocious and terrifying face. Her face instantly lost its color. However, she firmly did not move her gaze away. She even slowly bent down and trembled as she reached out her hand. Madame Ruan watched from the side. She clenched her handkerchief but did not stop her. Chapter 188. Madame Ruan couldn't help but frown. She knew that her daughter's current state was not right. As her daughter, it was destined that she would not be like the other girls who stayed in the boudoir. If she could surpass her master, that would be something to be happy about. However, this was her only child. In the end, she could not bear to do that. What she taught her was more about the survival skills of the inner residents. Once, she thought that there was no problem with the upbringing she had given her. However, a series of unexpected events had shattered her perception. She was glad that her daughter didn't break down and go crazy because of the heavy blow, but she also felt sorry for her body and mind. She hadn't gone through the first ordeal, and the latter followed closely behind. Her endurance was obviously in the middle stage. If she went crazy, then she wouldn't know anything or she wouldn't take it seriously at all. Naturally, she wouldn't suffer. Now she was either going backward or forward in the ordeal. As a mother, she naturally hoped for the latter. In fact, she didn't disappoint her. However, the problem now was because the process was too short. It was simply pulling the seedlings to help them grow. Crazy, cold, not recognizing her own family. Follow her and prosper. She would be a devil through and through. There were already signs of this before, but at this moment, it was taking shape. Madame Ruan restrained her gaze. Could it be that something happened just now that she didn't know? With a smile on her face, Ruan Fangfei turned over the 6 heads one by one to take a closer look. She even asked her mother with great interest how those wounds were formed. They were made after death. Wouldn't it be more interesting to cut them when they were alive? Her hands were full of dirt, but she didn't care at all. She didn't have the delicate appearance that she used to have when she was stained with dirt. After looking, she lost interest and used a handkerchief to wipe her hands. Little by little, she wiped very seriously and attentively. Clearly, some of the dirt couldn't be wiped off, but she still wiped it again and again. Mother, these people, were you the one who left them to slaughter the village? They failed to kill and were killed instead. They were really useless. However, this is also good. That village can be left to play with slowly. Mother, if there's anything you can't do, you can tell me. I can help you. Madame Ruan quietly looked at her daughter. In fact, she had some faint regrets in her heart. If she had known that this day would come, she would have trained her in the best direction from the very beginning. Now that it was like this, it was too late to change. Everything else was fine, but loyalty was a big problem. Because she would only put herself first, everything else would have to be put behind. However, there was a wrong move. If she used it properly, she would become a sharp weapon if she didn't know the most crucial part. Madame Ruan reached out and touched her face. Why are you covering your face at home and using such a thick cloth? Aren't you stuffy? Ruan Fangfei's eyes were brimming with smiles. Then mother, help me take it down. Madame Ruan nodded and casually took it off. Then she was stunned. The face that was almost healed and the scar that was gradually fading had now turned into a black line. It was like a sinister and ugly worm. There were fine lines like a spider web on the edge. This was the final push? Fangfei, what's going on? You're asking me? How would I know? What I eat and where, including the medicine used on my face, are all not under my control. There was a trace of innocence in her eyes that were no longer clear. Madame Ruan's face was very ugly. She was completely unaware that someone had taken advantage of her. If it wasn't so obvious, she was afraid that she would still be in the dark. But the problem was, when did this happen? Could it be that there was a loophole that she didn't know about in the backyard of the Ruan family that she controlled? Her own details might have been known by others, so it was reasonable for there to be a loophole. But this was unbearable. She took a deep breath. Fangfei, it's mother's negligence. Don't worry, mother will think of a way for you. No need, mother. I don't think there's anything wrong with this. Ruan Fangfei said with a smile. Good. When she no longer cared, she could be indestructible. Right, mother? Prepare a man who is proficient in bedroom matters for me. Madame Ruan slightly narrowed her eyes. She had really changed completely. Even if you didn't ask, I would have prepared one for you. This way I won't have to waste my breath. But wait until your body recovers. Although her private parts weren't particularly injured, it wasn't suitable for her to have sex in a short period of time. Send it over tonight. There has to be a process of adaptation. Madame Ruan was silent for a moment. She restrained all her emotions. Okay. She was straightforward. Ruan Fangfei smiled. From now on, this woman in front of her would probably no longer treat her as a daughter. Speaking of which, it was funny. She herself was dirty, but she wanted a clean daughter. Did she want to preserve the last bit of beauty, or was she deceiving herself? No matter which one it was exceptionally stupid. Daughter will go back first. Madame Ruan watched her step over the threshold, turn around and leave. She then looked back at the wooden box. People like them really shouldn't have extravagant demands. The final result was the same. She closed the wooden box expressionlessly. Ruan Fangfei's thoughts were right. She would no longer treat her as a daughter. Worldly possessions would still be the same as before. Emotionally, she would no longer be moved by her. She had completely abandoned her. Therefore, Madame Ruan's so-called feelings were quite ridiculous. Feelings that could be easily abandoned, were they called feelings? Perhaps she couldn't completely deny her efforts, but perhaps she had already imagined a situation like today. In fact, she had always had reservations in her heart. Since she didn't wholeheartedly in the past, she naturally wouldn't feel unbearable pain when she gave it up. Ruan Ruizhong went to find Lu Qingdi. His original intention was to ask for an imperial edict to search everywhere. Obviously, Lu Qingdi wouldn't agree to such a request. After all, the people accompanying him were all favored ministers, important ministers, and the largest group of the royal family. Could these people's residences be searched casually? Moreover, his son was basically in the summer palace. It was absolutely impossible to let a minister, even a trusted minister, touch his head. In Lu Qingdi's view, it was only a minister who was targeted, not him. Moreover, the one who died was just an insignificant servant. There was no reason for him to mobilize so many people. Besides, other people were fine, but your family was in trouble. Wouldn't it make people suspect that there was something fishy about your family? For the sake of your loyalty, it was good enough that they didn't investigate you. Therefore, Lu Qingdi asked Yu Zhongqing to take some people to help him search other places. In fact, this was equivalent to not helping at all. Fortunately, Lu Qingdi didn't go to the extreme. He told Ruan Ruizhong that if he had evidence and knew who was behind the scenes, he could issue an imperial edict to search. After leaving Lu Qingdi's sight, Ruan Ruizhong's face became colder. It wasn't that he didn't feel that Lu Qingdi was gradually becoming colder towards him. The emperor was ruthless. There were many emperors who killed meritorious ministers. He was just a grand secretary and really didn't count for much. His Ruan family was at its most difficult time. Because of those rumors and slanders, he was also impeached. Although Lu Qingdi didn't say anything, it didn't mean that Lu Qingdi didn't have any objections. After all, it also damaged Jin Qingwang's face. As for himself, although he wanted to be the same as before, he had to admit that his body was not as good as before. It seemed that he was somewhat powerless. However, these couldn't be revealed. Otherwise, the Ruan family would really be finished. Yu Zhongqing stood behind him. He was very clear about who was behind this matter and had long speculated that there was a problem with the Ruan family. What he was more puzzled about was whether the problem was with this Grand Secretary or other people in the Ruan family. However, he didn't need to ask about these. Since he acted as if he didn't know from the beginning, then he would keep it that way. In the end, Ruan Ruizhong didn't let Yu Zhongqing bring people to search with great fanfare. It was completely useless. There was no need to let everyone know and increase the gossip. Therefore, Yu Zhongqing brought people as if they were patrolling. They walked around the courtyard area and then returned to report to Lu Qingdi. The Ruan family's summer palace was not as good as the Ruan family's inner residence in the capital. If Li Hongyuan wanted to deal with some people, he had already made arrangements. However, Madame Ruan had lost so many people. Moreover, they had only been here for less than a day. It was not enough to investigate the people who had been in the courtyard for a long time. Even if they were investigated, they would not be able to find any flaws in a short time. After all, these people's roots were not here. To get to the bottom of things was not something that could be done in a day. Moreover, they themselves did rough work. If they were sent away, there would be no replacement in this place. The best way was to strengthen the rules and let them perform their duties. Otherwise, if they came into contact with things that they should not come into contact with, then it would not matter even if they were spies. Therefore, what Madame Ruan really wanted to investigate was the entourage from the capital. Old Madame Ruan had always been a smart person. Smart people naturally had their weaknesses. If they didn't come into contact with things that they shouldn't come into contact with, it didn't mean that they couldn't get useful things. Nails didn't need to be very smart. Maybe they just needed to remember what they saw. In terms of manpower, old Madame Ruan was simply dregs compared to Li Hongyuan. There was no comparison at all. No matter how strict her defense was, there were still times when she could take advantage of a loophole. When he knew that she was doing a big investigation, Li Hongyuan didn't have any reaction. He just let people create something that was right but actually wrong. It was guaranteed that old Madame Ruan would completely block the loophole. At least she would think so. In the evening, Li Hongyuan learned that old Madame Ruan had added a maid for her baby daughter. It was said that she was tall with long legs and a slender waist. She was a perfect beauty. The beauty held a lamp at night and walked leisurely. Not many people saw her. Li Hongyuan sneered. Playing this kind of trick to deceive others was fine. However, he seemed to have underestimated Ruan Fengfei. After being passively torn apart, she might as well be corrupted to the end. Even if he knew that she was a person with strong wills and wouldn't be defeated easily, what would it be like if she climbed back up again and again only to be stepped on again and again? She would live a life of grievance and humiliation, never being able to achieve the goal of her tone? However, it was late at night and he missed Wan. Chapter 189. Since she wanted to, he would go and have a look. This was not the first time he had attacked her at night. However, he intended to let her know of his existence tonight. Anyway, she was already his woman. Why should she hide? Someone was so self-righteous and shameless. He had never thought that as long as they were not married, everything would change. This kind of intimacy had crossed the bottom line and was absolutely not allowed. It had a great impact on a girl's family. If outsiders knew about it, it was equivalent to losing one's virginity before marriage. For example, if the person who was intimate with Jingwan, no, it should be said that he was her former two fiancés, even if he had nothing to do with Jingwan, he would definitely feel that it was inappropriate for him to be intimate with her. Given how much he cared about Jingwan, he would definitely explode and want to kill her. However, if this person was himself, his fiancée was equal to his wife. This was such a serious double standard. It was not the first time that he went to the Luo family, no, to the place where the third daughter of the Luo family lived in the middle of the night. It was a walk in the park for him. He was quite skilled in this business. He took the wind and climbed over the wall. Because Li Hongyuan didn't deliberately walk lightly, and every night, Bai Xiao and He Mei took turns to keep watch at night, not to mention the conscientious Nanny Gong. She would check the room at least once every night. Therefore, when he just approached, he had already been discovered. Seeing that Nanny Gong was silent, Bai Xiao also kept silent. Nanny Gong lit a small lamp. The light was dim and hazy. Because of a certain someone's frequent night raids, Nanny Gong firmly put an end to her young lady's habit of sleeping without clothes. She didn't want her young lady to be completely naked the moment he appeared, without even doing anything. Even so, on a hot day, Jingwan was only wearing a close-fitting doo-doo and underwear. She lay on her side with her face facing the inside. Only a thin silk blanket covered her waist. Therefore, her arms, back, and feet were all exposed. Even if he did not see her naked, the effect was almost the same. Someone's eyes became deeper and deeper. Li Hongyuan sat on the edge of the bed and reached out to hold Jingwan's leg. The soft and smooth feeling, Jingwan subconsciously kicked her foot, then immediately woke up. She woke up very quickly, and when she saw who was sitting by the bed, she suddenly sat up. She took the opportunity to withdraw her foot from his palm, and pulled the silk blanket around her waist to wrap it around her body. "Your Highness, why are you here?" She didn't dare to believe it. She knew you didn't follow the rules, but breaking into a lady's room at night. Li Hongyuan reached out and grabbed Jingwan's foot again, preventing her from retreating. A lazy and charming smile appeared on his face. "Because I miss you so much that I can't sleep at night, so I came here." He spoke the truth without any ambiguity. Jingwan rolled her eyes at him. After the initial shock, she thought about this fellow's style. It didn't seem strange that he would do such a thing. She regained her composure and withdrew her foot. After confirming that the other party wouldn't let go, she let him hold her foot. As he approached Jingwan's bottom line, Jingwan naturally retreated bit by bit. She hadn't touched his bottom line yet, so she didn't know how much he would indulge her. However, it was obvious that when facing Li Hongyuan, she was much more relaxed than before and didn't follow the etiquette. "You don't believe me?" Li Hongyuan smiled and gently rubbed his finger on her foot. "Don't touch it, tickles." "I believe you, why wouldn't I believe you? You are a prince, so your words naturally carry weight," Jingwan said perfunctorily. They just saw each other during the day and he missed her so much that he couldn't sleep. Who was he trying to fool? She was sleeping soundly but was suddenly woken up. Even if Jingwan didn't have a morning temper, she was still in a bad mood. "Now that your Highness has seen her, you should go back and rest." Li Hongyuan looked at her with a smile. His eyes were like small hooks, and his hand moved up her foot, caressing her calf back and forth. "Jiao Jiao, is this your first time touching this prince?" The greasy way of addressing her couldn't be any more obvious, and the way his hand moved, this bastard. "Do you need this subject to help your Highness undress?" Knowing that he wouldn't leave like this, Jingwan was too lazy to waste her breath. "Is Jiao Jiao inviting this prince?" The tip of his tongue brushed across his lips. Jingwan slightly tilted her face and covered her eyes with her hand. Bastard, using his beauty to trick her again. If your highness wants to rest like this, no one will have any objections. Actually, this prince doesn't have a problem either. I'm just worried that someone will feel unfair and take off my clothes later. His teasing tone and teasing expression made Jingwan want to slap him. He shouldn't have touched her sore spot. Jingwan was a little embarrassed, so she pulled the silk blanket and lay back down. Your Highness, please don't disturb my rest. Thank you very much. Looking at her tightly wrapped back, Li Hongyuan laughed silently. He quickly took off his clothes, leaving only a pair of underwear. Bastard, I told you not to disturb my rest. Hearing the flirtatious sounds, Mama Gong looked at the blushing Bai Xiao. You should rest. I'll keep watch here. Yes, Mama. Bai Xiao crouched down and quickly left. Mama Gong sighed. She thought that it would take a long time, but it didn't take long for it to stop. A hungry wolf that had tasted a bit of meat was actually able to resist the temptation. It was truly unusual. Seeing that Li Hongyuan, who had kissed her fiercely, didn't do anything else, Jingwan was a little puzzled. Seeing her puzzled expression, Li Hongyuan was a little angry and amused. He reached out and pinched her nose. Do you want it that much? He straightened his back. Jingwan couldn't help but shrink back from the hot temperature. She quickly shook her head. If you don't want it, then behave. Although I said that the most precious thing should be saved for the wedding night, I can't guarantee that I'll do it. Sometimes, a man's rationality depends on his lower body. Li Hongyuan's smile was a little evil. I'm worried that I won't be able to control myself. So Jiao Jiao, don't seduce me. Otherwise you'll have to bear the consequences. Jingwan reached out and slapped him across the face. Who was seducing who? Alright, stop fooling around. Li Hongyuan grabbed her hand and put it on his waist. He reached out and pulled her into his arms. There was a layer between them. He simply pulled the string of the doo-doo and threw it off the bed. Then he continued to move downwards. Wang Ye, you clearly said, don't talk. Li Hongyuan interrupted her. He removed the last barrier between them. Then he hugged Jingwan and rubbed against her. He let out a satisfied sigh. When he couldn't do anything, Li Hongyuan found that he really liked the feeling of skin against skin. It was an indescribably wonderful feeling. Li Hongyuan liked it, but Jingwan might not like it. First, it was summer. Sticking to a person was like a stove. Second, this bastard was too tight. It was like being entangled by a python. It was uncomfortable. Jiao Jiao, I said, don't seduce me. Li Hongyuan tightened his grip. Wang Ye, it's too tight. It's uncomfortable. Let go. She didn't expect him to let go. She could only ask for the next best thing. Let go if you call me husband. Li Hongyuan's chin rubbed against the top of her head. His eyes were closed. Shameless. Ayuan, it's really uncomfortable. Can you let go? Jingwan softened her tone. Li Hongyuan laughed silently in a place where she couldn't see. He finally showed mercy and lay down on his back. He let her head rest on his shoulder and put her hand on his chest. His other hand pulled one of her legs over and put it on his lap. Her soft thigh just happened to touch an unspeakable place. Jingwan was about to move away when he patted her warningly. He felt that Jingwan was finally obedient. A certain someone was satisfied with everything except for the part that he couldn't be satisfied with before marriage. He felt Jingwan's breathing. What's wrong? Can't sleep? I'm not used to it. Jingwan spoke the truth. So Wang Ye, can you leave my bed? You have to get used to it early. Jiao Jiao has to learn to adapt to my existence. Whether she was used to it or not, who knew better than him? Right now, it was just because she was awake that she wasn't used to it. Her body wasn't like that. The best example was that if she fell asleep, she wouldn't wake up just because he moved. That's after marriage. It was already early enough to be buried in the grave of marriage. In the end, he still wanted to deprive her of her freedom. After marriage, there are more important things. Jingwan chose to shut up. I can't sleep for a while. Talk to me. Talk about what? Jingwan's eyes were half closed. In fact, she was quite sleepy at this moment. She was trying to get sleepy. Who knows, she might fall asleep in a while. You talk, I'll listen. If I fall asleep, don't wake me up. A certain someone's voice was pleasant to listen to. Although it didn't become sexy because of the heavy desire, it was close to her ear. It was low and slightly numb. Perhaps it would have a very good hypnotic effect. Okay. Then Li Hongyuan softly said some interesting things. Jingwan stifled a laugh from time to time. She thought to herself that she really couldn't tell that a certain someone was actually hiding a sense of humor. However, Jingwan's brain gradually emptied. She became more and more sleepy. She became drowsy and her breathing became more and more long. Wan? Jingwan unconsciously responded. Just live your life happily. Don't worry about anything else. Leave everything to me, okay? Okay. Jingwan responded. Li Hongyuan kissed her forehead. He knew that she most likely didn't hear what he said clearly. She only said good because he emphasized the last 3 words. She was like a child who only knew how to talk and didn't know how to think. Everything came out of her mouth. However, he took it that she agreed to everything. Chapter 190. Because there was no sound in the room, Nanny Gong entered the room and didn't put down the bed curtain. She saw the 2 naked people sleeping in each other's arms. She felt numb now. Because she couldn't stop it, she could only think in a positive way. But in the current situation, it seemed that she couldn't find anything good for her young lady. She was taken advantage of, and it might even damage her reputation. All the good things were taken by a shameless bastard. Well, Nanny Gong knew that he didn't sleep well, but he seemed to sleep well with his young lady in his arms. After all, she watched him grow up and he was the only son of the imperial noble consort. It was impossible for Nanny Gong not to feel sorry for him at all. So, she could only think in this way to comfort herself. Nanny Gong went forward and picked up the clothes that were thrown on the ground and put them aside. She also picked up the silk blanket that had fallen under the bed. She looked straight ahead and was about to cover them when she suddenly met Li Hongyuan's dark eyes. She paused and continued what she was doing. She put the silk blanket on them. It wasn't very tight, just from their chest to their thighs. On such a hot day there was an ice basin in the room, but it was only to prevent their stomachs from catching a cold. Li Hongyuan took the opportunity to pull the silk blanket on Jingwan's shoulder. He tilted his head, put his cheek on her forehead and closed his eyes. Except for himself, probably no one could be sure if he had fallen asleep just now. With his eyes closed, Li Hongyuan appeared to be much more harmless. In Granny Gong's eyes, the 2 of them were a young couple who slept with their necks intertwined. However, from the way they slept, she could tell that they were very loving. At least he loved her very much. 4 ordinary couples, even if they slept on the same bed, they would sleep separately and each of them would occupy half of the bed. It was as if there was a boundary between them, not to mention those couples who still slept separately after the ceremony. Could they be called husband and wife? It would be better if they stayed like this for the rest of their lives. Nanny Gong took the lamp and turned to leave. Li Hongyuan blatantly stayed the night, so he naturally wouldn't leave early like before. Therefore, Jingwan woke up around the same time because of her biological clock. The honey-colored chest in front of her eyes and the warm and elastic touch under her palm made her a little dazed. Then she sat up. It was the first time she was hugged to sleep by a man, but she had a good night's sleep as usual. This was completely illogical. She had slept alone for a long time, and the only time she slept with cousin Xiao Xiao, she couldn't sleep well and even moved to another place. She was hugged to sleep by a man, but she was used to it. With such a big movement, there was no reason for Li Hongyuan not to wake up. He half opened his eyes and used the weak light to look at Jingwan's vexed and depressed expression. The silk blanket slid down to her waist, and the view in front of her chest was very good. But she didn't realize it. Her expression became dark, and the grumpiness she had when she woke up had long flown away. Whether it was because of the morning or some other reason, a certain part of her body began to stir again. He reached out and pressed a certain attractive soft part and rubbed it gently. Only then did Jingwan come back to her senses. She grabbed the mischievous hand and flung it away. Li Hongyuan reached out and grabbed Jingwan's waist. He lifted his long leg and pressed Jingwan back. She let out a short and hurried scream, but before she could finish her sentence, it was completely sealed. Jingwan was so angry that she was scared of his shoulder. She slapped his shoulder, but she didn't restrain her strength at all. A certain someone didn't care and didn't even stop her. He focused on enjoying the morning dessert. Jingwan slapped him a few more times, but her strength gradually weakened. It was because her body was too young and inexperienced. In this aspect, Li Hongyuan was her master, so her resistance was infinitely close to zero. She couldn't withstand his teasing at all. Instead of hitting him, she turned into hugging his shoulder and back and catered to his kisses. There was a tendency for things to go awry. Knock, knock, knock. There were 3 moderate knocks on the door. "Miss, are you awake?" When Mama Gong saw the maidservant standing at the door with a cup of water, blushing and not daring to enter, she knew what was going on inside. It should be known that it was already early in the morning. It was really improper for them to be fooling around in a girl's boudoir in the Luo family. Even after marriage, no one would fool around in a girl's boudoir before marriage. Not to mention they were still engaged. They had already endured it at night. Now, if it was discovered by others and spread to the ears of master and madam, it would be terrible. The maidservants were apprehensive, but she didn't. She directly knocked on the door. Suddenly awakened, Jingwan reached out to push him, but she couldn't move him at all. Prince? Her expression was a little bad because a certain someone was in heat early in the morning, and also because she was disappointing. Li Hongyuan's face was a little angry, but he quickly restrained himself. He buried his face in Jingwan's neck, unwilling to let go. Jingwan was so angry that she scratched him. There were a few obvious bloodstains on his shoulder and back, but a certain someone didn't seem to feel pain and didn't even make a sound. It was difficult for this kind of person to restrain himself from offending his superior. Jingwan's anger grew. She opened her mouth and fiercely bit him. Although it was a fierce bite, it was really a merciless one. She even tasted blood. Li Hongyuan finally moved. He reached out to touch her head. Good darling, let go. If you continue to bite, I won't be able to hold back. He hinted at her by straightening his back. Jingwan's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. Was this guy a masochist? He was bitten like this, but he was still excited. Miss? The urging voice sounded again. Prince, move. Jingwan's voice was a little cold this time, without any intention of discussion. Li Hongyuan raised his head. Zhe, your temper is getting worse and worse. Jingwan sneered. Who are you blaming? Me. Li Hongyuan admitted it like a hoodlum. On one hand, he indulged her without any bottom line. On the other hand, he was viciously angering her. It was time for a clay figurine's temper to come out. However, a certain person felt quite accomplished. Why aren't you moving? Li Hongyuan was quite obedient this time. He hugged her and turned around, placing her outside. Jingwan quickly got up and wrapped herself in a silk blanket. Just as she was about to call him in, she suddenly paused and turned around. His body was in the golden ratio. His muscles were perfect and not bulky. His lines were smooth and beautiful. He also had a face that was off the charts. Lying on his side with one hand supporting his head, he really was not an ordinary seductive person. Jingwan pulled off the silk blanket and covered him from head to toe. Who are you showing off to? My maidservant is about to get married. Her hand that was about to lift the silk blanket paused. Why did these words sound a little sour? She smiled silently. Her movements were a little smaller, only exposing her head. Fine, I'll only show it to you, my darling. He was covered, but she was not. It was convenient for a certain someone to see her from head to toe, although the light was too weak to see clearly. In Jingwan's opinion, this feeling was 100 times more shameful than having skin to skin. She subconsciously crossed her arms over her chest. Li Hongyuan laughed sullenly. Is there anything on your body that I haven't seen before? Jingwan was so angry that she simply smashed the pot. I'm getting up. Mama, come in. In any case, the people around her had already seen her from head to toe countless times. Thinking about it, she had been served since she was young. It would be strange if she still felt ashamed in front of the people around her. However, after doing something even more shameful, Jingwan could not remain calm even if she tried to pretend to be calm. When she saw Mama Gong come in with a lamp, her eyes were a little shifty and she did not dare to look at her. Mama Gong lit up the other lights in the room. Jingwan seemed to suddenly wake up and hurriedly grabbed a piece of clothing. After wrapping it around her body, she realized that it was a certain prince's clothing. Her clothes were taken away to be washed after she changed out of them last night. Now, she could only see the doo-doo and underwear that a certain someone had taken off. Mama Gong acted as if she did not know anything. She glanced at Li Hongyuan, who was on the bed, and said, "Bring the water in." If it was not for this person, they would not have come in first. The maidservants filed in. After confirming Li Hongyuan's position, they squatted down as a form of greeting and no longer looked up. However, in the end he was a big man and his presence was too strong. However, no matter what they thought, this was the master's business. It was not their turn to interfere. They only needed to control their eyes and not look around. They also needed to control their mouths and not talk nonsense. Jingwan went to the bathroom in the back and quickly changed her clothes. Only then did the awkwardness lessen. After coming out, she quickly freshened up and looked at Li Hongyuan, who was obediently covered with a silk blanket. Your Highness, do you want me to help you get up? It would be best if he did not. How could Li Hongyuan not see Jingwan's insincerity? I'll have to trouble you, Jingwan. After fetching water again, the others left. Jingwan took his clothes and prepared to put them on him. However, a certain someone did not appreciate it and said that he wanted to wash up first. Jingwan wanted to throw the clothes directly at his face. However, when she saw that his shoulder was obviously bruised and swollen, and there was also blood, it seemed that she had bitten him too hard. In the end she endured it. However, so what if he had a good body? Could he show off as he pleased just because he had a good body? Jingwan first brought him water to rinse his mouth, then wrung a handkerchief for him to wash his face. From beginning to end, a certain someone was sitting there with a golden knife. A certain part of his body was really irritating to the eyes. He did not take the handkerchief she handed to him and just slightly raised his head. When he did not take it, Jingwan also pretended that she did not understand his meaning and persistently stretched out her hand. This prince is still a little sleepy and wants to go back to sleep. Jingwan reached out and covered his face with the handkerchief, wiping his face carelessly. Jingwan is really not gentle at all. Jingwan's mouth twitched into a fake smile. This subject's daughter has never served anyone before. Your Highness, please excuse me. Li Hongyuan looked very magnanimous and did not want to argue with her. It's okay. Jingwan was born smart and quick-witted. She will probably learn after doing it a few times. Jingwan wanted to say that it was a skill she would learn after marriage. She did not want to learn it at all now. When she was putting on clothes, it was not very smooth. Since she was young, the people who served her were too conscientious. She basically never wore clothes herself. When she put on clothes for herself, she could not do it perfectly. Moreover, a certain someone was not very cooperative and kept moving his hands and feet. Even after half a day, he was still loose and looked particularly seductive. However, Jingwan was not in the mood to appreciate beauty. After this torment, she was already sweating all over before she even started her morning exercise. Fortunately, a certain someone knew his limits. When he saw that Jingwan was really going to be provoked, he took over and was very nimble. He was done properly in less than half a minute. You have this kind of hand speed, but you insist on letting her, this handicapped hand, do it. Is there any meaning in it? However, she was not someone who knew how to wear clothes herself. As a dignified Qin Wang, the people who served him should be more careful and meticulous. Not only was it surprising that she was so good at self-reliance, it was also very strange. Li Hongyuan put on his shoes and stood up. He reached out to pinch Jingwan's chin and smiled. It doesn't matter if you don't know how to. In the future, this prince can also serve the princess consort. As he spoke, he leaned over and kissed the corner of her mouth. Jingwan directly rolled her eyes at him. Your Highness should stay to serve others. This subject's daughter can't bear it. Li Hongyuan narrowed his eyes. Jingwan's words made him a little angry. He reached out to grab Jingwan's waist and pulled her into his arms. You are this prince's wife. If you can't bear it, then who else in this world can? Jingwan, the only person who can be on equal footing with this prince is you, understand? On equal footing? These 4 words made Jingwan more than a little surprised. In this secular world where imperial power was supreme and men were superior to women, even the wife of the first wife did not have the qualifications to be on equal footing with her husband. Otherwise, why would there be the saying that the husband was the sky? Even the empress, who was the mother of the world, had the same temperament. In Jingwan's opinion, a person like Li Hongyuan did not care about women at all. But he actually said such words. Jingwan even suspected that he had been seen through by someone. Wife. No matter what, many thanks to your highness. How could Li Hongyuan not understand Jingwan's meaning? She thought that he only respected his wife. It was the same for anyone who sat in this position. She never knew. It's not your wife, it's you. Only you can sit in this position. Do you understand? Only you, Luo Jingwan, the one and only, the most complete you. Jingwan was taken aback. Was what he meant by what she had understood? But was it possible? He had so many fiancés. At that time she had no interaction with him at all. But when she looked at Li Hongyuan, her heart couldn't help but beat faster. Sure enough, everyone liked to hear these words of love. Even she was no exception. Jingwan always said that she should guard her heart and not beat for any man. But she didn't know that if she could control her heart, then it wouldn't be called love. After a long while, Jingwan forced out a smile. Is that so? Many thanks to your highness for your love. She didn't know how stiff and forced her smile was. Li Hongyuan suddenly felt a little discouraged. This girl still didn't believe him. She just didn't understand. Sometimes he even had the impulse to tell her everything. But in the end he cooled down this idea. Wanwan had never been easily moved by sweet words. If he told her about those unknown feelings, she might think that he deliberately made it up. And even if she believed it, it had no direct connection to whether she was moved or not. might even backfire. Not everyone could be used to others forcibly occupying their life. And Wan might even think that the person he liked was the person in her memory, and it had nothing to do with her. After all, she didn't know anything. Wan's nature was open-minded, but when it came to the relationship between a man and a woman, anyone could be stubborn. At that time, the only one who would be distressed would be herself. In any case, whether she knew about his past or not, he still had to take step by step to win her heart. He had to use practical actions to tell her that he loved her from the beginning to the end. Then, when the time was right, he would tell her everything about his past. Naturally, when the conditions were right, success would follow naturally, and Wan would be closer to his heart. When it came to Jingwan, he always remembered one thing. No matter how much he said, it was better to do it. Forget it. You'll know in the future. Li Hongyuan gently rubbed her neck and kissed her forehead. Jingwan felt his frustration and powerlessness, as if she had failed to live up to his feelings. If there was no relationship between them, Jingwan might not have done anything. But they were engaged, and soon they would become the closest people. One's glory, one's loss, so this made her feel a little helpless. She couldn't tell right now. Was he doting on her? As a substitute? Or a change of heart? Or was it true love? No matter how mature Jingwan's temperament was, no matter how rational she was, and no matter how much psychological preparation she did, it couldn't change the fact that she was a blank slate when it came to love. She was not good at dealing with this kind of thing. Li Hongyuan looked at her small appearance and his mood improved a lot. This girl was actually soft-hearted. She was amenable to coaxing but not coercion. She valued friendship and righteousness. She would never accept other people's kindness for no reason. Once she accepted it, she would always try her best to return it. This was also good. Although her heart was a little heavy and difficult to conquer, it did not mean that it was impossible to conquer it. Because of their special relationship, he could force her to accept his kindness. Sooner or later, he would win her over. Don't think too much. Do what you should do. Just do what you want. Do what I want. In front of such beauty, Jingwan expressed that she wanted to pounce on him. Hence, she unceremoniously hooked her arms around Li Hongyuan's neck and kissed him fiercely. Before Li Hongyuan could turn the tables on her, she broke free from his grasp and ran away. Li Hongyuan touched his lips. Wan, are you comforting me? He suddenly smiled. Comforting? Of course not. Jingwan expressed that she was just seduced by his beauty. That was all. After that, Granny Gong came in and handed Li Hongyuan a cup of warm water. Miss said that drinking a cup of warm water after waking up every morning is good for your health. Li Hongyuan raised his eyebrows. He took the cup and drank it in one gulp. After that, Granny Gong quickly helped him tie up his hair. Jingwan didn't know how to do such a difficult thing. After everything was done, Li Hongyuan casually went out. However, Granny Gong, who stayed in the room to tidy up the bed, found some bloodstains. Her first reaction was to feel her heart sink. Could it be that miss? On second thought, it couldn't be. She didn't have any blood the last time they did it for so long. It didn't make sense for her to lose her virginity in such a short time last night. The bloodstains didn't look like any other traces. Since it wasn't her and there was no blood on her body, then it was most likely. She quickly tidied it up and didn't think too much about it. Jingwan was already doing morning exercises. Although he knew that if there was nothing going on, she wouldn't get up every day, but this was the first time Li Hongyuan saw it with his own eyes. The time they spent alone in the previous life wasn't short. However, because of special circumstances, Wan's morning exercises were also something to kill people. Suddenly there was a kind of peace and quiet. Li Hongyuan sat at the side and watched. However, as he watched, his thoughts started to wander. With such a soft waist, sometimes wouldn't he be able to do whatever he wanted? The last time they had intimate contact, except for the last step, they did everything. However, they were all very ordinary positions. Maybe he could try something else next time? Li Hongyuan felt a little itchy on the tip of his tongue and unconsciously swept the inside of his teeth. The sky was about to turn white. Your Highness, you should go back, Granny Gong said. Li Hongyuan looked sideways at her and then stared at Jingwan for a while. Finally he stood up and walked towards Jingwan. Your Highness, are you leaving? You can't bear to part with me? Then after I have my meal, I'll go see your grandparents before I leave. Farewell, Your Highness. When dealing with a thick-skinned person, one couldn't hesitate at all. Even more so, one couldn't persuade him to stay. Tiske, her forehead was wet with sweat and her face was stiff. The words, "Get lost," were clearly written on her face. He reached out to touch her face and leaned closer. With a charming smile, he said, "Sweetheart, wait for me tonight?" In response to Li Hongyuan, Jingwan's face was as stiff as a coffin. Li Hongyuan was in a good mood. He held her face and kissed her without any disdain. "It's impolite not to reciprocate. This is a gift in return." Then he walked away. "Bastard." Jingwan cursed in a low voice. She looked at the servant girls and saw that they all had their heads lowered. The only thing missing was a sign above their heads that said, "This servant didn't see." Granny Gong's back was as he left. Her sign probably said, "Out of sight, out of mind." His reputation, his image, they were all ruined by that bastard. Li Hongyuan returned to the mansion. As a close attendant, Eunuch Mu had already prepared water for the bath. However, his master seemed to be coming back much later than expected. It was different from the previous times. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.